Abbie, thank you so much for coming on the Scholarship GPS podcast. We met, I don't know, it's probably been maybe a month ago, and I've been getting your emails and seeing things that you're posting on social media, and I've been so impressed. I'm so glad that we were able to get this chance to record this episode because I think you're providing a really valuable service and lots of valuable information for parents out there who are either currently going through the college admissions process or looking forward to doing that in the next few years. So thanks. If you would just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into this world of college admissions, and I've got some questions lined up for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So my name is Abbie. I have been working in this space for the last couple years or so. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania a few years ago and really started working with students on a one-on-one basis and kind of started to notice that students were really struggling. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of stress, and that's kind of what sparked this idea to start this business. It's only a few months old, which is kind of crazy. But really excited to kind of combine my background. I am in a clinical psychology PhD program currently. So my background in psychology with also admissions, because kind of like what you were saying, I feel like there really isn't that much out there right now to combine like strategies with also stress reduction.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, this is a very stressful process. I think you're probably going to give us a little bit of info on how to maybe reduce that stress. We'll get into that. So the name of your business is Confident College Admissions. Obviously, that relates to, eliminating or reducing that stress. If you're confident, you're going to be less stressful. But does that name or your decision to even get in this have anything to do with your own admissions process? I mean, you are much younger than me. You're much closer to that than I was. I feel like I'm a dinosaur when I'm talking about college admissions because although I did go through it with my son, not that long ago, but even in whatever that is, 6 years, I think that process is very different today than it was just 6 years ago, much less 30 years ago.
Yeah, so I think part of the reason why I decided to start this is really because of my journey in college. So, like I said, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of stress about how to get into college, all the things that you have to do in order to really do well and get to the type of school that a lot of students aspire to get into. And I think once we get there, we kind of are like, oh, okay, what do I do now? We have all this pressure on us, especially at top colleges, where we feel like we have to perform all the time. And I definitely felt a lot of that stress while I was there. I have realized since graduating from college and now being in my current program that I really enjoy being in a supportive, collaborative environment. And I think that is something that we don't really think quite as much about when we're applying to college because
hmm
we're so focused on just getting in, just going to college that we kind of forget some of those other important pieces of finding the right school for us, like the environment that we're going to be in, the types of people we're going to be surrounded with, and all those other important aspects that are kind of forgotten because we're just focusing on getting into the best school possible.
Yeah, yep. Well, like I said, we met on social media, and so you're probably seeing some of the things I'm seeing, and there are definitely a lot of major misconceptions out there about college admissions. Is there any one in particular that stands out that you kind of want to set the record straight with here?
Yeah, I think really the biggest misconception that I see from a lot of different people that I work with is that you have to be perfect. You
Mm.
have to have these perfect grades. You have to have a 1600 SAT. You have to be in a million clubs. You pretty much have to find the cure for cancer, students think,
Yeah.
in order to even be considered.
Yep.
And working with students one on one, you kind of hear a lot of these things from them. I just talked to a student recently who was kind of sharing with me that they felt like they really didn't achieve that much. And as
Mm.
soon as they started talking about some of the things that they were doing, all these leadership activities that they were involved in, all this volunteering that they were doing, I'm like, you're doing more than I did in
Yeah.
order to
Yeah.
get into school.
Yeah.
So I think there's just so much pressure on these students now to have all of these things going on, and they think that they have to do it in order to be perfect, get into a great school. The reality is that if you have too many activities, though, if you have too much going on, it's really hard to have and tell an authentic story.
Yep.
So if you're involved in theater and you're involved in bio club and you're doing all of this volunteer activities, all of these different things in so many different realms, you're not really going to be able to come up with a good, strong, cohesive story. And you even might confuse yourself. Like, what am I
Hmm.
actually interested in? What is
Yep.
it that I actually want to do? And it makes it really hard for you when you go to write your application because you've kind of been not focusing on what you're actually interested in or passionate about
Yep.
throughout the whole time you're in high school because you're just trying to focus on getting in. So I think the most important thing is really focusing on going really deeply into those activities that you really enjoy.
Yep.
Maybe being a leader for one activity or joining a club or starting a club that you're really interested in. It's really important to be authentic to what you're interested in. And that helps you really tell a strong personal statement and also just helps your application come together as a whole and make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying all of that, I'm thinking how similar that is for earning scholarships too. That
Mhm.
so many students, whether they're focused on scholarships or just getting into college, they just do more and more and more
Mhm.
rather than doing less in a focused manner,
Yep.
so that you have that story to tell, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. I think we go so overboard because we see all these people doing all of these things and
Yeah.
there's so much pressure. So we feel like we have to keep up and we kind of lose ourselves along the way.
Yeah, yep. I mean, that's a good point. And there's a lot of talk these days about the effects of social media on, anxiety and people comparing themselves. And I was just thinking as you were talking about that, like certainly wasn't a factor when I was, a young person.
Mm,
Um, I would have been aware of like people who were doing better, quote, better than me in high school, just in my school. But now every kid is aware of every perfect 1600 student on the planet today, right? Because every mom's posting about it. And so, yeah, it's going to make you feel like you're not measuring up, and
mm,
you're not seeing the moms posting the kids who are getting the scores like you. And maybe they should. I don't know. Or maybe we should just all get off social media. But
mhm.
that's a different story.
Yeah, I think social media has caused a lot of problems
Yeah.
for a lot
Yeah.
of people. And, it's not just the students comparing themselves, but
Yeah.
also the parents as well, kind of seeing how their kid measures up and maybe then even putting more pressure on their kid because they
Yeah.
want to have this perfect kid that they can share with everybody. So there's a lot of pressure on all of these different sides.
Yeah. Well, speaking of test scores, a lot of schools, when COVID hit, started going test optional, and I know it's starting to swing back the other way, where more schools are now requiring test scores. So,
Mm.
where does that maybe fit in with current misconceptions about college admissions?
Yeah, I think that with that, it's really important that students understand that they have to be authentic. There's kind of this idea that with these test scores, if we are taking away those test scores, I always encourage students, if you have a good test score, submit it
Hmm.
because that kind of shows them, like, okay, I am a good student. I have these capabilities. If you have that score, and it kind of gives you, if you don't have those scores, it can kind of be like a negative in some ways, even though it's test optional. But I think with test optional now being more widely available, it's really important that we have essays that are really authentic
Hmm.
and that stand out. So a lot of students think that they have to have some sort of dramatic story, or like I
Yeah.
said, they have to do pretty much everything available to them in order to just get noticed. But I really think the first step in this process is reflection. We've talked about this a little bit already, but I think a lot of what we're seeing today is that students don't really know exactly what they want to do. They're being
Hmm.
influenced by so many different things, their parents, their peers, what they see on social media, and they're kind of not really being in tune with what do I want? Who am I?
Hmm.
And colleges really want to see that reflection. They
Yeah.
want to know who you are. They want to know who is this person going to be on my campus. And they don't want this big dramatic story. A lot of times it's these small takeaways that can really have the biggest impact. And they really want to see how you've grown, what you value, all of these different things. So I can actually share a personal example
That'd be
about
great.
my personal statement and kind of what I wrote about, because I think that, something that's really important to me is being vulnerable and open, because I don't think we get a lot of that
Hmm.
just in
Yeah.
society in general. And I think it can be really helpful to kind of hear what other people have done and what they've shared. So, my personal statement, I wrote about hugs. That is something that was and is still a big part of my life. I remember being like a little 5-year old and running around on the playground and seeing my friends and be like, oh my gosh, hi, I'm going to give you a bear hug now, and just hugging them. And my mom always says that they were like, oh my God, it's Abbie. Please run away. I don't want to get mauled right now. But I kind of talked about that and how hugs were a big part of my life. And then going through middle school, I kind of explained how I experienced a lot of bullying, a lot of exclusion during that time, and I didn't get to experience as much connection in that way through hugs. And then I kind of moved on to high school and shared how some of the activities that I did kind of brought me back out to my normal self. So, getting involved in poetry and drama and being able to share some of my excitement and passions with other people helped to bring me back to that state where I'm like, okay, I'm not a 5-year old anymore, so I'm not going to run around and hug you. But being able to share some of my excitement again through um, hugging somebody and kind of tie that into what I want to do. So at the time, I was really interested in biology. I was planning on being pre-med and want to be a pediatric oncologist. So kind
Okay.
of tying that into some of those academic interests as well, and kind of sharing like,
Yeah.
in cancer specifically, especially with children. Sometimes you're going to be able to provide comfort when something isn't going well and maybe there aren't any more treatment options, but also being able to celebrate with people when their cancer is cured. So, kind of again, tying that back to something that I do consider a core part of my identity of hugs and
Hmm.
just sharing, like, be able to support people in that way or care for people in that way. So through this like common thread, I've kind of walked them through pretty much my whole life.
Hmm.
And also part of the things that I want to do in my future. And of course, people are worried. I hear people say all the time, like, what if I don't exactly follow the path that I set out in your personal statement? And I think that my story is also a great example of like, you are going to end up doing so many different things in college,
Yep.
most likely going to end up going in a slightly different path, if not a completely different path
Hmm.
than you expect. So just write about what you know right now and what you think
Yeah.
now. And kind of the takeaway is that we have these everyday moments, these core parts of our identity that can be really powerful if we're authentic and share something that is a big part of our lives. It doesn't have to be a huge moment, it can just be these small things.
Yeah. Two things that you said there really stood out to me. One was you kind of one of the misconceptions is that students have to feel like they have this story of,
Mhm.
I don't know how the right word to say, but like a sob story or, some kind of tragedy. And I even see that like in scholarships, I'll see parents asking, my student has this rare condition. Is there a
Mhm.
scholarship for that?
Mhm.
And usually there is, but I always try to remind them everybody else applying for this scholarship has that same story.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
have to have something that makes you unique in that. Having this condition only allows you to apply for it. It doesn't mean you're going to win it. And so you
Mhm.
need that personal story still, right?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think that we are very caught up because we see a lot of these stories, maybe a
Hmm.
lot of examples of these really tragic stories. I can think of some on Instagram that I've seen. And we're kind of drawn to that.
Sure.
There's this thing called doom scrolling. I don't know if you
Hmm.
know
Yeah.
what, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much like we're just drawn to negative things. If
Yep.
we see negative headlines, like we're drawn to that. And I think it's kind of the same with personal statements. If we see this like really negative thing that somebody's writing about, we're like, oh my gosh, I have to write about that too. And I think for so many people, we feel a lot of stress because we feel like if I don't have this super negative thing happening to me, then am I going to be able to get in? And we don't even take a step back and think like, oh my gosh, I'm so lucky that I don't have anything super
Right.
negative to write
Yeah.
about. How blessed am I to be in this position where I don't have this super tragic
Yep.
story that I can use. But I think it also has a lot of pressure where we want to stand out and
Mhm.
we don't really know the best way to. So we go for that thing that we think is going to be easier to make us stand out.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and then the other thing you'd said when you were talking about your own essay and your own story was that you'll often hear from students that they're not sure of what they want to do in the future, or they're kind of
Mhm.
worried that if they put pen to paper and say,
Mhm.
I'm going to do
Yep,
this,
yep.
like they're locking themselves in for the next 80
Mhm.
years of their life,
Yep.
or even for like the next four, and that
Mhm.
the school might kick them out if they change majors or something. And I see that in the world of scholarships as well. And even like I got into this because of my son, and
Mhm.
he from I'm going to say like middle of elementary school all the way until middle of senior year, he said, I want
Mhm.
to be a history professor. And so that was
Mhm.
his story, and that's how he
Yep.
won a lot of scholarships. And
Mhm.
then towards the end of senior year, oh, I actually am more interested in economics.
Yep.
Well, so it was not a huge change. They're related subjects, but he didn't lose those scholarships that he won, where he said he was going into history, and none of them even asked, like, has something changed? I mean, so
Mhm.
yeah, students have a story, have an idea of what you want to talk about, what you're going to do, but you are not locking yourself in. You're not making a
Mhm.
commitment for the rest of your life.
Mhm. And I think too, like I'll share another personal example when we go in with such a strong belief in what we want to do. Like I said, I was pre-med. I think we can sometimes ignore some of the signs that, wait, this is not actually working out. This is not
Hmm.
actually what I want to do. So,
Yep.
like I said, I was pre-med. I started a biology club while I was in high school. I did like a summer program about biology. And then I took AP Bio and loved it. I remember my first bio class at Penn. I was like, huh, how does this relate to me helping people?
Uh-huh.
And then I shadowed an oncologist and kind of noticed like, oh, we're in and out of the room in 10 minutes. You're asking about their medications. And that's pretty much it. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
aren't really getting a full view of who this person is, how you can best help them. And that's when I
Yeah,
start to reconsider, okay, is it that, I'm not interested in this anymore? Is it these classes? Or is it that, I actually don't align with this career path as much as I thought I did?
yep,
So being open to the possibility that maybe there's something else out there for you that's even better suited that you just don't know of yet, I think that's
sure.
really important.
Yeah, yep. Great advice. Well, again, obviously the name of your business is Confident College Admissions. Can you give us a picture of what a confident application looks like? Whether that's a picture for the student or maybe their parents.
Yeah, I can talk about both. So I think that to me, a confident application is where a student can really take a step back, like we talked about. They reflected and they're really being true to themselves. So I think this is really a key piece, kind of like we talked about before. I think a lot of students kind of just go into this and they're like, okay, I'm going to pick a prompt and then I'm going to write for that prompt for my Common App essay. And then they kind of just write for whatever the prompt is because that's what they've learned in high school. You get a
Hmm.
prompt, you write the essay based on that. But what colleges really want to see, they want to see that you've taken a step back and reflected. And I think that also helps to clarify some things in the student's mind as well. I think for parents, it's also really about supporting a student without taking over. So I think this is really hard for parents,
Hmm.
especially if you're listening to this podcast. I'm sure that all the parents listening here really want to support their student. They really want to help.
Hmm.
But sometimes taking a step back and letting the student lead helps them to build trust and independence that they're going to need for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have these conversations early on, try to set some expectations and set boundaries, and respect those boundaries, because I think it's very easy for students to get overwhelmed if they're constantly being asked, when are you going to do your personal statement? When are you going to submit this application? On and on and on. It just increases their anxiety even
Mhm.
more. And when parents aren't approached in a way where, the student's responding the way they want, maybe the student's shutting down, then parents anxiety increases. So
Right.
then this is just a cycle that
Yeah.
obviously continues on and leads to a lot of problems. So really thinking about this process as the first step into young adulthood. So this
Hmm.
is really the first step students are going to take to gain some independence, and that's something that's really important for college. So kind of treating them more so like an adult
Yeah.
during this process and trying to respect their boundaries. It can be hard. I acknowledge it can be really
Mhm.
hard.
Sure. Yep.
But trying to do some of that mental work yourself and acknowledging, okay, I need to let my student have more control over this than maybe I feel more comfortable with.
Yeah, well, I love that you said that about this being one of the first steps to adulthood and giving that independence. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about an interview I did with one of my former students' mothers, and that was she said the exact same thing about the scholarship process.
Mhm.
In fact, if somebody wants to hear that, it's the episode that would have come out on September 22nd, I believe, of 2025, with her name's Sarah and her daughter's name is Madeline, and she talked about how this scholarship process, she let Madeline take the lead, and
Mhm.
Sarah, the mom, was there for support, maybe some motivation, and that really through that process, they built a new kind of relationship. Not that they had a bad relationship before, but it was just a new way that they were relating to each other more as adults than, mother and child. So, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's super important. Parents kind of, I think there's a lot of emotions during this time.
sure.
And I think that for parents, it can be really hard to let go. Like, this is your child, they're growing up. This is kind of the first time where you're thinking, like, oh, they're going to be gone. They're going to be leaving. They're not going to
Mhm.
be around as much anymore. So that can bring up a lot of emotions in us and kind of can make us act in ways that we might not if we weren't feeling those emotions. So it can be really helpful to kind of take a step back, even maybe write out some things together with your child and come
Yeah.
up with like boundaries that you're going to have, kind of like a general plan, and then kind of let them do their own thing once you've had that meeting and set those boundaries. And really trying to help foster like a good, positive relationship for you, because this year is going to be very stressful for a lot of people.
Yeah, yep, and it's gonna go by in the blink of an eye too.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, for anybody who, I think you've shared some great tips and advice, but for anybody who might still be overwhelmed, do you have any resources or first steps that you might want to direct them to?
Yeah, I think really the first step, this process can be super overwhelming, is just trying to break it down into something that's really manageable. So I've created a couple different free guides. The first one is my Confident College Admissions Roadmap. This is just a month by month breakdown of all of the different things that you need to do. And it also has a printable checklist. So it's nice. You can see everything all in one page and you can
Mhm.
kind of check things off as you go, get a little dopamine boost as you go throughout your college admissions process. So that really offers a lot of practical things that you can implement, like making sure you're on the right timeline for your FAFSA, writing your essays, all of those different things. The other thing that I have that's a free guide is my staying grounded during college admissions guide.
Okay.
So this is really for students. These are tools for when, or parents as well, when maybe their mind is racing. Maybe they have thoughts like, what if I don't get in? Should I have done more activities? What if my essay isn't perfect? All of these different things. And it also helps students with comparative comparison stress that they might
Okay.
be experiencing. Because like we were talking about with social media, a lot of students are really comparing themselves to
Yeah.
others, and it can be really easy for us to overthink and get in our heads. So together, these kind of provide like practical advice and also mindset strategies that can really help students to approach this process in the best way possible.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen several of the resources that you have, and they're all fantastic. So I'm glad you mentioned at least those two, and I know that there's some others out there for people to tap into. So that's great.
Thank you.
Well, before we wrap up, do you want to share like kind of your vision for the future of your business? Any, changes or anything like that that you'd want the listeners to know about?
Yeah. So like I said, I've only been doing this for the past few months in terms of like this business. So I'm really excited to be expanding this more this year and the future. So I really want to bring both the mindset and well-being side of admissions with strategy. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that I am helping both students and parents. I think that parents a lot of times are kind of left out of this process. They're kind of overlooked
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. So, really trying to incorporate all of that. So, right now, I do offer a personal statement course that helps
Okay.
you through the whole process. So, pretty much from brainstorming until a finalized essay. And I also have a course that I call Unlocking College Admission Success. So, it walks students through how to pick schools, how to pick recommenders, all of these different things, and kind of takes you through that process, interviewing, all of those types of things. And then in the future, there's a lot of different things that I want to do that I'm really excited about. I really want to incorporate more of the mindset piece into my overall offering. So I'm planning on having a few different courses, one on trying to stay calm and focused during applications,
Mm-hmm.
one trying to help students have this emotional readiness for the transition to college, and then another one having these like long-term mental habits for meaning, purpose, calm throughout college and beyond. And I also really want to supply resources for parents. Like I said, I think parents are often overlooked throughout this
Mm-hmm.
process.
Yeah.
But as you and I both know, being in some of the Facebook groups, there's a lot of stress that
Yes.
we
Yep.
have. So trying to provide some resources for them. And if any of you listening have any insight, anything in particular that you think would be really helpful for you or people you know, I'm happy to take all recommendations and see if there's something that I can help create for you. So really the overall goal is to combine strategy pieces, some of the things I'm building now with well-being to kind of provide this overall strategy and well-being and just like overall care for ourselves because I think
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much pressure and stress on students that we need to be able to focus on some of the practical things, but also being able to take care of ourselves physically and mentally and all those different things during
Yeah.
this time.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a few more resources there, so we will put links to all of the resources you mentioned, and very much appreciate you coming on the show. This is great. I know people are going to want to reach out to you, so we'll put those links in the show notes. Abbie, thanks again for coming on the Scholarship GPS podcast. Look forward to having you on again in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Thanks.